संस्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय Ramakrishnaaya te namaha. Welcome to this series of talks on the disciples and devotees of Sri Ramakrishna. This is the 12th talk on the devotees of Sri Ramakrishna. Most of them have been on monastics, those who took to monastic life after they came in contact with Sri Ramakrishna. This is the second talk on a householder or lay devotee. After the talk on Rani Rasmani. Studying the lives of Rani Rasmani, who was the proprietor of the Bhavatarini Kali temple in Dakshineshwar, and Mathurnath Bishwas, her son-in-law, will give an idea about Sri Ramakrishna from an earlier period. The monastics, for example, were from a later period, and there were more or less contemporaries. But the lives of Rani and Mathur will give an insight into Sri Ramakrishna as a sadhaka or spiritual aspirant, compared to being a guru or teacher, which a study of the monastics would reflect. This is the reason why this is important. So basically, we have the monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna and the lay disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. The lay disciples like Rani Rasmani and Mathurnath Bishwas, when you know about them, you know about Sri Ramakrishna from an earlier period. From an earlier period, that period was when he was practicing these various spiritual disciplines. So it's a different perspective than the perspective from his monastic disciples, who were all contemporaries. Not much is known about Mathur's early life, and there is some overlap between Rani's and Mathur's life. Mathur's ancestral home was in the Khulna district of East Bengal, or now Bangladesh. He studied at the Hindu college with Devendranath Tagore being his contemporary. Devendranath was the father of Rabindranath Tagore, who was a Nobel laureate in literature. Swami Chetanananda says that both Raj Chandra, the Rani's husband and herself recognized Mathur's ability and aptitude. Initially, Mathur was married to Karunamayi, Rani's third daughter, but she died in 1833, leaving Mathur with a son. After this, Rani and Raj Chandra asked Mathur to marry Jagadamba, their fourth daughter, to keep him in the family. After Raj Chandra passed away in 1836, Mathur was elevated to be the manager of the Rani's vast estate. Mathur's association with Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineshwar. The Bhavatarini Kali temple took 8 years to build and was dedicated on 31 May 1855. Ram Kumar, Sri Ramakrishna's elder brother, was the first pujari of the main temple. Sri Ramakrishna was also present on the day of the dedication, but did not reside in the temple or eat the food of the temple until a few days later. Madhur then met Sri Ramakrishna and was said to have been impressed by Sri Ramakrishna's gentle, pure and simple nature. Sri Ramakrishna was only 19 at that time. Swami Chaitanananda says that Madhur tried to engage Sri Ramakrishna as a helper through Ramkumar, but Ramkumar said that his younger brother was not interested in any work. At around the same time, Hriday, Sri Ramakrishna's nephew, came to Dakshineshwar in search of a job. An incident that occurred that revealed Sri Ramakrishna's talent and devotion. An incident occurred that revealed Sri Ramakrishna's talent and devotion to both Rani and Madhur. Once Sri Ramakrishna sculptured an image of Shiva from the mud or clay from the riverbank or Ganga. He then worshipped the image that he had created. While he was doing this, Madhur was walking past. Madhur asked Hriday to give him the image once Sri Ramakrishna had finished worshipping it. Madhur then took the image to Rani and told her the story behind it. Both Madhur and Rani were impressed by Sri Ramakrishna's skill in sculpting the image. This triggered Madhur asking Sri Ramakrishna directly to be involved with the worship of the Divine Mother, Bhavatarini Kali, helping his older brother. Sri Ramakrishna consented as long as Hriday took responsibility for Bhavatarini's jewelry. Bhavatarini is a statue of Kali in Dakshineshwar. 3 months after the main dedication of the Kali temple, the priest of the Krishna temple accidentally dropped the image of Sri Krishna. As a result, one of the legs of Sri Krishna's image broke off. This was considered to be a bad omen by the priests and administration. They consulted the Pandits as to what should be done next. The Pandits were unanimous that the image be replaced. At Madhur's suggestion, Rani consulted Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna posed the question that if one of Rani's son-in-laws was to break a leg, would she replace him or get medical attention to treat his injury? The answer was obvious. She would mend the leg. Similarly, the broken image can also be mended and kept in the shrine. This answer surprised the Pandits. Rani and Madhur were overjoyed by the advice. Ramakrishna not only mended the image, but agreed to be the new pujari of the Krishna temple. Within a year of being the pujari of the Radha Krishna temple, Sri Ramakrishna was shifted to the main Kali temple because of the death of Ramkumar, his eldest brother. Swami Chaitanananda says that this was the catalyst to the spiritual tempest that Sri Ramakrishna was caught in. Madhur is said to have played an important role in Sri Ramakrishna's life for the following 14 years. Having the confidence and well-wishers of Madhur enabled Sri Ramakrishna to practice different modes of sadhana in the safe haven of the temple precinct without worrying where his next meal was to come from. Sri Ramakrishna was seized by divine madness. He couldn't do the regular and scriptural ritualistic worship. Nevertheless, he would worship and interact with the Divine Mother in his own way. Acting in his own way caused some problems for Sri Ramakrishna from the other temple staff, who couldn't understand Sri Ramakrishna's worship. Some of the strange things which he used to do were he would climb on the altar, he would sing, laugh and joke and talk with the Divine Mother, partake of the food or bhog before it was offered, or feed the cat with it. It is chronologically difficult to narrate the incidents of Mathur's interaction with Sri Ramakrishna. I don't know if the following incidents occurred before or after the following event. Once Mathur was sitting in the Kunti, the residential quarters, observing Sri Ramakrishna walk from one point to another, to and fro. When Sri Ramakrishna went from A to B, it was as though the Divine Mother of the universe was walking. When he walked back from B to A, it seemed as though Shiva was walking. Mathur initially thought that this sight was an illusion. So he rubbed his eyes and looked again. The same thing happened. Then Mathur ran out and dropped down at Sri Ramakrishna's feet and began to weep. Sri Ramakrishna told him to get a hold of himself. Mathur proceeded to explain to Sri Ramakrishna what he had just seen. Sri Ramakrishna said that he did not know anything about it. We have discussed spiritual experiences in detail in the talks on Swami Advaitananda and Swami Vijnanananda. So I will not do this again here. It is up to you if you want to accept this or not. Nowadays, in Sri Ramakrishna's puja mantras, we use Sarva Deva Devi Swarupaya Sri Ramakrishnaya Namaha. The incident that just quoted is evidence for this idea that Sri Ramakrishna manifests as all devas or gods and devis or goddesses, that all devas and devis can be propitiated through the worship of Sri Ramakrishna. Because Mathur, what he saw was one way when he was walking, it was as if it was the Divine Mother of the universe. When he came a different way, it was as though it was Shiva. So that's why this gives some weight to the fact that Sri Ramakrishna can be worshipped and the different deities can be propitiated through him. Getting back to the narrative, the other priests complained against Sri Ramakrishna to Mathur. Mathur wanted to find out for himself rather than listen to others. So he came to the temple secretly and observed Sri Ramakrishna. After observing him for some time, he was convinced that Sri Ramakrishna was a serious and sincere sadhaka or aspirant. Mathur then told the others not to interfere with Sri Ramakrishna's worship. Mathur had also had that spiritual experience, but it is hard to know if this experience took place before or after Mathur observing Sri Ramakrishna's worship. Even after this, Sri Ramakrishna's madness did not abate. Mathur also had cause to doubt Sri Ramakrishna's sanity. Another incident occurred in the Shiva temple. One day, Sri Ramakrishna entered one of the 12 Shiva temples in Dakshineshwar and started reciting the Shiva Mahimna Stotram. While he was chanting, he was oblivious of the external surroundings. He was overwhelmed with emotion and tears poured down his cheeks, and he cried out, "O Lord, how can I express thy infinite glory?" In the meantime, the other workers of the temple gathered, and some of them observed that he seems to be more mad on this day compared to other days. They were waiting for Sri Ramakrishna to climb upon the Shiva Linga and start riding it. In the meantime, Madhur came. He was with the others watching Sri Ramakrishna. When the others asked Madhur's permission to reprimand Sri Ramakrishna, Madhur warned them against laying a finger on Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna then came to normal consciousness and asked, like a child, if he had done anything wrong. Madhur then reassured Sri Ramakrishna. But this was not the end. Rani Rasmani once came to Dakshineshwar to hear Sri Ramakrishna sing. She had previously heard of his singing and was much impressed. Sri Ramakrishna then started singing for the Divine Mother in Rani's presence. He then suddenly stopped and slapped her on the cheeks and said to her, "What? Even here you think such thoughts?" Suddenly there was commotion in the temple. Rani's attendants and security personnel of the temple were waiting for Rani's order to dismiss Sri Ramakrishna from the temple. But Rani sat there, composed and introspective. She realized that she had been thinking about a court case while Sri Ramakrishna was singing, and that Ramakrishna was justified in slapping her. She later said aloud, Ramakrishna was not to blame, and dismissed the security guards. But Madhur questioned Sri Ramakrishna's sanity. Madhur and others testing Sri Ramakrishna. Madhur did not know if Sri Ramakrishna's condition was due to mental health issues or divine intoxication. So he and Rani tested Sri Ramakrishna in a number of ways. 1. Appointment with a leading physician, Dr. Ganga Prasad Sen. Rani and Madhur appointed a physician by the name of Dr. Ganga Prasad Sen to thoroughly examine Sri Ramakrishna. In those days, there was no distinction between an ordinary doctor or GP and a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So medical doctors handled both body and mind. So like a GP doctor came and examined him. 2. Arranging nutritious food. Special food and cold drinks were arranged for Sri Ramakrishna. Rani and Madhur probably thought that Sri Ramakrishna's condition may have been caused by a lack of nutritious food. Number 3. Arranging prostitutes to seduce Sri Ramakrishna. Rani and Madhur probably thought that Sri Ramakrishna's divine madness was due to his observance of brahmacharya or continence. So they arranged a prostitute to seduce him. When she entered his room, Sri Ramakrishna repeated, "Mother, Mother," and ran outside. Sri Ramakrishna then told Haladari and others about her, not keeping any secrets. On another occasion, Madhur took Sri Ramakrishna to a brothel. At the brothel, which was located at Mechur Bazaar, Calcutta, there was a courtesan by the name of Lakshmi Bai. She was hired to seduce Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna was not told exactly where he was going. He thought it was an outing with Madhur and Hriday. When he entered Lakshmi Bai's room, he addressed her as the blissful mother. Lakshmi Bai had not experienced anything like this before. She then called the other girls and said that he, meaning Sri Ramakrishna, must be free of lust. The other girls said that he must be a God-man and praised and saluted him. In the meantime, Madhur and Hriday came up to the room. The girls then reprimanded Madhur and Hriday. Madhur seems to have tested Sri Ramakrishna for kanchana or gold. I do not know for sure if the following incidents were tests by Madhur of Sri Ramakrishna or if it was the case of Madhur showering expensive gifts on Sri Ramakrishna because he was so close to him. Before this incident occurred, Swami Chaitanananda says that Sri Ramakrishna had already equated gold with mud or clay by saying to himself and carrying, by saying gold is clay and clay is gold. By throwing both of it in the Ganges, Sri Ramakrishna equated gold, wealth, and mud. And he was once on the bank of the Ganges, he took both in his hand and he threw both of them into the water, saying clay is gold and gold is clay. Before this incident occurred, Swami Chaitanananda says that Ramakrishna had equated gold with mud by saying to himself and carrying it out in practice. Madhur is said by Swami Chaitanananda to have known this incident. Still, he lavished Sri Ramakrishna with expensive gifts like a new set of crockery made from gold, silver for Sri Ramakrishna to use. But to Sri Ramakrishna, a gold plate and a leaf plate were the same. Since Madhur had brought him to his residence in Calcutta and fed him from gold plates, didn't affect Sri Ramakrishna in the least. Madhur then dressed Sri Ramakrishna in expensive clothing and surrendered all his property and belongings to him and said to him that he, Madhur, was only a steward. Sri Ramakrishna was not fazed by this. He remained the same. So Madhur gave a lot of things to Sri Ramakrishna, dressed him, etc. But Sri Ramakrishna was not fazed by it. He was not affected by it. Another incident which may have been a test for kanchana or gold was when Madhur presented Sri Ramakrishna with an expensive shawl. Sri Ramakrishna initially was very happy with it and showed it off to people, not forgetting to mention the price. This is like what we all do after purchasing something expensive. From the Black Friday sales or Boxing Day sales. But Sri Ramakrishna then awakened to the fact and started discriminating that the shawl was only composed of material things like thread and wool. Why should he be enamored with it? It may protect from cold, but there are other cheaper options like blankets. Sri Ramakrishna discriminated in this way. He then threw the shawl and spat on it. It is important to note that discrimination or discernment or viveka as a practice probably goes back to the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, where Neti Neti is described. Later, Shankara in Viveka Chudamani said that discrimination or viveka or discernment is an important practice between Nitya Vastu and Anitya Vastu. This is followed by Sadananda in the Vedanta Sara. In the meantime, Vidyaranya in Jivan Mukti Viveka in the second chapter fine-tunes discrimination to being a practice to nullify the effects of attachment or aversion present in the human mind by seeing faults in the things that attract or repulse people. Sri Ramakrishna was following Vidyaranya in his process of discrimination when it came to finding the faults with the shawl he was given to Mathur. So if you find that something attracts you or repels you, then you should try and practice discrimination as a way of getting over that. Mathur, after he had heard of what Sri Ramakrishna had done with the shawl, commented that Sri Ramakrishna had done the right thing. This is why I felt that Mathur was testing Sri Ramakrishna. 5. Discussion about God having to obey or not obey the laws of science he or she has instituted. Mathur, even after being involved or arranging all these, still wanted to test Sri Ramakrishna. He said to Sri Ramakrishna that once certain laws of nature or science are instituted, God had to abide by them. He could not go against them. But Sri Ramakrishna maintained that he or she who created the laws would be able to go against those laws and were not subservient to them. They were also able to make new laws. A case in point was a red flower tree. According to Mathur, a red flower tree was only able to produce red flowers, not white flowers. But Sri Ramakrishna maintained that the red flower tree was also able to make white flowers. The next day, Sri Ramakrishna, while he was heading to the pine grove, noticed a hibiscus tree with two flowers on the same branch. One was red and the other was white. He broke it off and showed it to Mathur, who admitted defeat. This seems like a miracle which defies the laws of science, but it is an incident that occurred in Sri Ramakrishna's and Mathur's life. Mathur's interaction with Vairavi Brahmani. Sri Ramakrishna practiced Vaishnava and Tantric sadhana under the Vairavi Brahmani. The Brahmani was an expert in these two modes of sadhana. After studying Sri Ramakrishna during his sadhana and knowing his spiritual symptoms, she argued that Sri Ramakrishna was an incarnation of God. This was hard to stomach for skeptics like Mathur. Mathur argued that in Hindu law there were only 10 incarnations. This is what is known as Dasavatara, which Jayadeva sings about in his hymn. But the Brahmani begged to disagree. She said that in the Bhagavata, 24 and more incarnations are cited. Mathur finally had to accept the argument of the Brahmani. The Brahmani in turn asked Mathur to convene a conclave of scholars to present Sri Ramakrishna to the wider world. Mathur took up this idea. Number 7. Engagement of Pandits for a conclave of scholars to assess Sri Ramakrishna's symptoms and declare him to be an avatar. Swami Chaitanananda, following the Leela Prasanga, mentions only the name of 2 scholars who attended this conclave. But there must have been others who also attended. The 2 scholars whose names are mentioned were specialists in Vaishnavism and Tantras. They were probably not there at the same time, but came at different times to evaluate Sri Ramakrishna. Vaishnavism was represented by Vaishnavacharan, who was a specialist on the subject and a leader of the Vaishnava sect. The Tantric perspective was represented by Pandit Gauri, who was not only a scholar of the Tantras, but someone who had acquired occult powers or siddhis. At the conclave, there were Vaishvacharan and other Pandits. The Brahmani outlined the experiences of Sri Ramakrishna and how they tallied with the experience of others like Sri Chaitanya, mentioned in the Vaishnava scriptures. Vaishnavacharan accepted all the findings of the Brahmani. Vaishnavacharan also endorsed the fact that Sri Ramakrishna had experienced Mahabhava, the acme of spiritual longing in Vaishnavism, which Sri Radha and Mahaprabhu Sri Chaitanya had experienced. The Brahmani was ecstatic about this. Mathur was dumbfounded, and Sri Ramakrishna took it like a child, exclaiming that he was thankful for it was not a disease. Vaishnavacharan seems to have been the president of the conclave. After a few days, Pandit Gauri arrived. Remember, Pandit Gauri was a representative of the Tantric sect. One of the occult powers that he had acquired was to shout very loud. When Gauri entered the Dakshineshwar temple, he chanted a mantra very loudly. Sri Ramakrishna then chanted the mantra even louder. Pandit Gauri then tried to outdo Sri Ramakrishna, but he wasn't able to. He realized that Sri Ramakrishna was beyond him. Gauri Pandit's occult powers were eventually absorbed by Sri Ramakrishna. Gauri Pandit then heard about Vaishnavacharan's conclusions about Sri Ramakrishna being an avatar or incarnation of God. Gauri Pandit then said that that was an understatement to call Sri Ramakrishna an incarnation, and that Sri Ramakrishna was that from which a fraction of whose power incarnations originate. This is quite a verdict from Gauri Pandit. All of you who are brought up in the West or influenced by the West will be weary of occult powers. Even though sometimes with these witches and other organizations, they believe in supernatural things. Generally, because of the influence of science and secularism on society, people do not accept occult powers. Generally, the scientific West does not accept the existence of the supernatural or occult. They only accept what they call naturalism or science. But in India, the supernatural has been part and parcel of people's lives for centuries. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali has a whole chapter called Vibhuti Pada dedicated to describing supernatural powers to arise from the practice of yoga. Swami Vivekananda deals with this subject in the small booklet called Powers of the Mind, in which he states that there should be no demarcation between naturalism and supernaturalism. The supernatural has been a science that was cultivated in India for thousands of years. Swamiji himself adds that this is not to say that there have not been a great deal of fraud. Sometimes there is fraud, and that gives the whole thing a bad name. Swamiji himself adds that this is not to say that there has not been a great deal of fraud. There was fraud during Swamiji's days, there is still fraud. That is why Indian philosophy may have a bad name in the West. But one should not dismiss so easily the supernatural or the occult like modern scientists and atheists like Richard Dawkins. Dismissing these go against the spirit of inquiry in science and is equivalent to throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Let me quote Richard Dawkins from God Delusion. I quote, "An atheist in this sense of philosophical naturalist is somebody who believes that there is nothing beyond the natural physical world, no supernatural creative intelligence lurking behind the observable universe, no soul that outlasts the body, no miracles, except that there is something that appears to lie beyond the natural world as it is now imperfectly understood. We hope eventually to understand it and embrace it within the natural." So everything, only natural phenomena comes under the ambit of science. If it is supernatural, then if they're not able to understand it now, they believe that science, once it develops further, will be able to explain and understand it. So they look down upon the supernatural or the occult. Another quotation is, "Supernatural influences are by definition beyond the reach of science." Swami Vivekananda's response to atheists, naturalists, and scientists is taken from his The Powers of the Mind lecture, delivered in Los Angeles, USA on 8 January 1900. And I quote, "In very remote times in India, thousands of years ago, these facts, supernatural and occult, used to happen even more than they do today. It seems to me that when a country becomes very thickly populated, psychical power deteriorates. Given a vast country thinly inhabited, there will perhaps be more psychical power there. These facts the Hindus, being analytically minded, took up and investigated. They came to certain conclusions. That is, they made a science of it. They found out that all these, though extraordinary, are also natural. There is nothing supernatural. They are under laws just the same way as any other physical phenomenon. It is not a freak of nature that a man is born with such powers. They can be systematically studied, practiced, and acquired. The science they call the science of Raja Yoga. There are thousands of people who cultivate the study of this science, and for the whole nation, it has become a part of daily worship." That is from the Complete Works. This quotation is not from a religious zealot, but from someone who used the method of science or verification to test Sri Ramakrishna and his experiences. Swami Vivekananda was also a rationalist. If even he says that there must be something to the occult and supernatural, then there must be something. We cannot dismiss it so easily like modern scientists and naturalistic philosophers. Mathur, as a helper in the different spiritual practices performed by Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna practiced different practices both within Hinduism and also outside with different teachers or gurus, or sometimes also without them. As already stated, he practiced Tantra and Vaishnava sadhana under the Vairavi Brahmani. In addition to these, he practiced Vedanta under Totapuri and Islam under Govinda Roy. Whenever any material was needed for this, Mathur would supply these. Take for instance when he practiced Madhur Baba. This is a Vaishnava practice. For this, Sri Ramakrishna wore women's clothing like Radha Rani for about 6 months. Mathur provided what was necessary like expensive Varanasi saris, jewelry, etc. When Sri Ramakrishna practiced this, he was totally immersed in the role. He would walk like a woman, talk, gesture like a woman, etc. Mathur took Sri Ramakrishna to his residence in Jan Bazar, Calcutta. At his residence, the women of the family were able to connect with him easily. During Durga Puja, Sri Ramakrishna was dressed like a woman and was with Jagadamba when even Mathur could not recognize Sri Ramakrishna in women's apparel. When Sri Ramakrishna did sadhana according to Islam, he took initiation from Govinda Rai. When Sri Ramakrishna practiced this, he did not observe his Hindu customs. Mathur had to intervene at times so that the master did not go too far. The interdependence of Mathur on Sri Ramakrishna and vice versa. Once Jagadamba, Mathur's second wife and Rani Rasmani's fourth daughter, became ill. Her condition was not good and there was fear that she may pass away. Mathur was in a precarious position because if she died, the property that they owned might be contested. Mathur, in desperation, consulted Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna replied to Mathur that Jagadamba will not pass away and that she would recover. Mathur then saw Jagadamba recover and was relieved. There were other instances when Mathur was caught in difficult situations or lawsuits while managing his large estate, when he would come and take refuge in Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna would initially ask Mathur to face the consequences or bear the responsibility, but later promised to help him or to pray to the Divine Mother or offer a flower to the Divine Mother on his behalf. Indeed, Mathur would at times treat Sri Ramakrishna as a god or guru, but at other times he would regard him as a small boy. Sri Ramakrishna also relied on Mathur whenever he had a problem. He would even consult Mathur about his spiritual experiences. They had an interesting relationship together. Sri Ramakrishna meeting other seekers of God in Mathur's company. To those of you who have read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna or Kathamrita, will know that Sri Ramakrishna often visited people like Vidyasagar, the Sanskrit scholar and philanthropist, or Dayananda Saraswati, who was the founding leader of the Arya Samaj. These were not just important people, but were seekers of God. The entries in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna are mostly from the 1880s. But even earlier, during Mathur's lifetime, Sri Ramakrishna visited people like Devendranath Tagore and Dina Mukherjee. Devendranath was one of the leaders of the Brahmo Samaj. He was also Rabindranath Tagore's father. Rabindranath was the winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1913. Devendranath was initially welcoming and cordial to Sri Ramakrishna, but he later withdrew an invitation to attend a Brahmo Samaj function because Sri Ramakrishna couldn't always cover himself fully like a Bhadralok or a gentleman. Sri Ramakrishna constantly falling into religious moods was the cause of this. Mathur's experiencing Bhava Samadhi and its effect. Mathur had seen Sri Ramakrishna go into Samadhi. The desire to experience the same for himself awakened in his mind. Swami Chaitanananda also says that Mathur must have known that Sri Ramakrishna had the power to enable people to experience Samadhi for himself. So on one occasion, Mathur requested Sri Ramakrishna to enable him to experience Samadhi. Sri Ramakrishna tried to dissuade him, but he wouldn't listen. Then Sri Ramakrishna said that he would ask the Divine Mother for this. A few days later, Mathur actually experienced what Swami Chaitanananda calls Bhava Samadhi while at his residence at Jan Bazar. When Sri Ramakrishna went to see him, Mathur fell at his feet, calling him father, and pestered him to take back the experience. Mathur complained that because of that experience, he was unable to give his mind to his business dealings. He said that Bhava Samadhi was all right for someone like Sri Ramakrishna, but not for someone like him with a lot of worldly responsibilities and activities. When Sri Ramakrishna stroked Mathur's body, the experience left him. Mathur's travels and pilgrimages with Sri Ramakrishna. Swami Chaitanananda says that Mathur and Sri Ramakrishna were close companions for 14 years. In the following section, the pilgrimages that Sri Ramakrishna went on with Mathur, in Mathur's company, will be briefly narrated. On 27 January 1868, Mathur and Jagadamba, his wife, left for a pilgrimage of northwestern India with 125 people, including Sri Ramakrishna and Hriday. They travelled by train, and the cost of the pilgrimage to Mathur was rupees 100,000. The first stop that they made was in Deoghar, where there is a famous Shiva temple. Sri Ramakrishna, while at Deoghar, must have passed through a village where there was a lot of abject poverty. People were famished and were in a very bad condition. Sri Ramakrishna was moved by this sight. Immediately he told Mathur to feed and clothe the people. Mathur tried to dissuade Sri Ramakrishna by saying that the pilgrimage was going to be very expensive. Sri Ramakrishna would not take no for an answer. Mathur finally had to relent, and he arranged for some clothes to be brought from Calcutta for the villagers. He also fed and supplied them with oil for their bodies. A few weeks ago, we discussed the relief work that Swami Akhandananda did near Sargachi or Mahula on 15 May 1897. This is considered to be the first relief work of the Ramakrishna mission. But this incident of Sri Ramakrishna himself doing relief work in Deoghar is considered to be the inspiration. A similar incident happened when Mathur and Sri Ramakrishna visited one of Madhur's estates near Ranaghat, West Bengal. This place may have also been in the grip of a famine, which used to occur regularly in India. Here also, the villagers were malnutritioned and were feeling the pangs of starvation. Sri Ramakrishna, just like he had done at Deoghar, requested Madhur to feed the villagers and clothe them. This is another inspirational event for the Ramakrishna Mission's relief activities. Getting back to the pilgrimage of Varanasi and other places in northern India, Sri Ramakrishna had an important vision at the Manikarnika Ghat in Varanasi. The Manikarnika Ghat is where funeral pyres are lit for the dead, for the disposing of bodies. Because as you know, the Hindus, they cremate their bodies. They do not bury them. So as a result, this Manikarnika Ghat is a famous place in Varanasi where the bodies are cremated. Here, Sri Ramakrishna had a vision of the Divine Mother sitting by the funeral pyre, untying the knots that bound dead people to the world. In the meantime, Shiva whispered a mantra in the ear of the departed souls and gave them liberation. There was a notable incident in Vrindavan. Sri Ramakrishna befriended an old Vaishnava woman by the name of Ganga Mata. She was an advanced sadhaka. She felt that Sri Ramakrishna was an incarnation of Sri Radha and had great reverence for him. She wanted Sri Ramakrishna to live with her. Sri Ramakrishna also agreed, but Madhur would not leave Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramakrishna remembered his old aged mother living at Dakshineshwar. So Sri Ramakrishna returned with Madhur and the party. In 1870, Sri Ramakrishna went to Navadvip, the birthplace of Chaitanya, with Madhur. On the way, they stopped at Kalna in Burdwan. There they met a Vaishnava saint by the name of Bhagavan Das. It was mentioned earlier that Madhur spent 14 years with Sri Ramakrishna. Over this period, there was a marked change in his personality on account of his association with Sri Ramakrishna. Madhur passed away on 14 July 1871 after having typhoid fever. So this is the end of Madhur's summary on Madhur's life, and in it we get a different perspective of Sri Ramakrishna from when he was in his younger period. So with this we stop for today. And when will we resume, Maharaj? February? The classes will resume in February. Thank you. Next Sunday we have Holy Mother's birthday, and that will be a small function on the 11th and a greater function on the 14th, which is Sunday. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.